The most disturbing aspect of this case isn't just that a 21-year-old college student vanished without a trace on Halloween night. It's that Chris Jenkins may have been the victim of a serial killer or killers who have been targeting young men across the Midwest for decades, leaving behind a trail of mysterious drownings that authorities refuse to connect despite overwhelming evidence of a pattern. When Chris's body was found in the Mississippi River 4 months later, it raised more questions than it answered and opened the door to one of the most controversial theories in modern criminal investigation. Viewer discretion is advised if you're fascinated by mysterious disappearances and controversial criminal theories. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on for more incredible stories like this one. On Halloween night 2002, in downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota, a promising young college student named Christopher Michael Jenkins was about to become the center of one of the most perplexing missing person cases in recent American history. Chris was a 21-year-old business student at the University of Minnesota and captain of the lacrosse team, a young man with everything to live for and a bright future ahead of him. What happened to Chris that night would devastate his family and contribute to growing evidence suggesting that a serial killer or group of killers may be stalking young men across the American Midwest. Chris Jenkins was the kind of young man parents dream of raising. He was intelligent, athletic, and well-liked by peers and professors. As a business student at the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Management, Chris maintained excellent grades while excelling as lacrosse team captain. His teammates respected his leadership abilities, and coaches praised his dedication and work ethic. Chris came from a close-knit family who supported his pursuits, and he had a wide circle of friends who enjoyed his company and sense of humor. On the evening of October 31st, 2002, Chris decided to celebrate Halloween by going out with friends to the Lone Tree Bar and Grill, a popular establishment at 5th and Hennepin Avenue in downtown Minneapolis. The bar attracted college students and young professionals, and it was a place where Chris felt comfortable and safe. He dressed in a Native American costume for the Halloween celebration, complete with traditional clothing that made him easily recognizable to anyone who saw him that night. The Lone Tree Bar was crowded with Halloween revelers, and Chris was in good spirits as he celebrated with friends. Witnesses described him as happy and relaxed, showing no signs of distress. He was drinking alcohol, but those who observed him said he didn't appear intoxicated to the point where his judgment would be significantly impaired. Chris was known to be a responsible drinker who understood his limits. The last confirmed sighting of Chris Jenkins occurred around 1:15 a.m. on November 1st, 2002, when he was seen leaving the Lone Tree Bar alone. Witnesses reported that he appeared to be walking steadily and didn't seem to be in distress or danger. He was heading toward his apartment, several blocks away. The route he would normally take was well lit and traveled by other pedestrians, even at that late hour. What happened to Chris Jenkins after he left the bar remains one of the most baffling mysteries in modern criminal investigation. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no one saw him after he walked out that night. He simply vanished into the Minneapolis night as if he had never existed. The fact that a young man could disappear so completely in a busy urban area with security cameras and numerous potential witnesses has never been adequately explained. When Chris failed to return or contact family and friends, those who knew him immediately recognized something was seriously wrong. Chris was not the type to disappear without explanation or cause loved ones worry. He was responsible and considerate, always keeping in touch with family and maintaining commitments to school and the lacrosse team. His absence was noticed almost immediately by roommates and teammates. The initial response from law enforcement was frustratingly inadequate. Police treated Chris's disappearance as a case of a college student who had probably gotten drunk and would turn up in a day or two. This attitude reflected a common bias in missing person cases involving young men, particularly college students who are often assumed to be irresponsible or engaged in risky behavior. Chris's family refused to accept the police department's dismissive attitude and immediately began their own search efforts. They organized volunteer search parties, distributed flyers with Chris's photograph, and contacted local media to publicize his disappearance. The family's efforts brought attention to the case and put pressure on law enforcement to take the matter more seriously. The search expanded to include the Mississippi River, which runs through downtown Minneapolis near where he was last seen. The river was a logical place to search, given its proximity to the Lone Tree Bar and Chris's route home. However, initial searches yielded no results, and investigators began considering other possibilities. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the mystery deepened. There were no credible sightings, no use of credit cards or bank accounts, and no contact with family or friends. It was as if he had simply vanished from the face of the earth. The lack of evidence was particularly frustrating for his family, who were left to imagine the worst while hoping for the best. The breakthrough came on February 23, 2003, nearly 4 months after Chris's disappearance, when his body was discovered floating in the Mississippi River near the 3rd Avenue Bridge in Minneapolis. The discovery was made by a passerby who noticed something in the water and called police. The location where Chris's body was found was several miles downstream from where he was last seen, and the condition of the remains raised immediate questions. The autopsy determined that the cause of death was drowning, but circumstances surrounding his death remained unclear. The medical examiner found no obvious signs of trauma or violence, leading to the initial conclusion that Chris had accidentally fallen into the river and drowned. However, this explanation raised numerous questions that were never satisfactorily answered. One of the most puzzling aspects was the location where Chris's body was found. The Mississippi River in Minneapolis has strong currents and flows rapidly, especially during winter months. For his body to have traveled from the Lone Tree Bar area to where it was discovered would have required navigating several bends and passing under multiple bridges. The fact that the body was found relatively intact after 4 months in the water was also unusual. The official ruling of accidental drowning was immediately questioned by Chris's family and independent investigators. They pointed out that Chris was an experienced swimmer familiar with the Minneapolis area and would have been unlikely to accidentally fall into the river. The weather wasn't particularly harsh, and there was no evidence he had been drinking to the point of severe intoxication. The case gained national attention when it was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, and when independent investigators began connecting his disappearance to a pattern of similar cases involving young men who had vanished under mysterious circumstances and were later found drowned in bodies of water across the Midwest. This pattern would eventually become known as the smiley face killer theory, one of the most controversial topics in modern criminal investigation. The smiley face killer theory was developed by retired New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, who began investigating cases of young men who had disappeared and been found drowned in rivers and lakes across the United States. The detectives identified common elements: victims' demographics, typically college-aged men who were intelligent, athletic, and well-liked; circumstances of disappearances, often after leaving bars or parties; and discovery of bodies in water despite swimming abilities. According to the theory, Chris Jenkins and dozens of other young men were victims of a coordinated group of killers who targeted specific types of victims and used drowning as their preferred method of murder. The theory gets its name from smiley face graffiti found near locations where some victims' bodies were discovered, leading investigators to believe killers were leaving calling cards. The theory has been met with significant skepticism from law enforcement and academic criminologists who argue that the cases are not connected and that the drownings are accidental deaths misinterpreted as murders. Critics point out that young men are statistically more likely to engage in risky behavior while intoxicated, and that drowning deaths among this demographic are not uncommon in areas with bodies of water. However, Supporters argue that the number of cases and similarities are too significant to be explained by coincidence. They point to evidence such as victims' swimming abilities, lack of obvious explanations for how they ended up in water, and discovery of suspicious graffiti near some crime scenes. In 2006, the Chris Jenkins case took a dramatic turn when the Hennepin County Medical Examiner changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide, making Chris the first victim in the alleged smiley face killer series to be officially classified as a murder victim. This change was based on new evidence and re-examination of circumstances, including discovery that his body showed signs of having been in water for a shorter period than originally believed. The reclassification vindicated his family's belief that he had been murdered rather than accidentally drowned. However, it raised new questions about who had killed him and why. Despite official recognition that Chris had been murdered, no arrests were ever made, and the identity of his killer remains unknown. The investigation has continued sporadically over the years, with law enforcement occasionally reviewing the case and following up on new leads. However, the passage of time has made it increasingly difficult to solve, as witnesses' memories have faded and physical evidence has been lost or degraded. The impact of Chris Jenkins's disappearance and murder extended far beyond his immediate family and friends. His case became a symbol of the broader issue of missing and murdered young men whose deaths are often dismissed as accidents or suicides without adequate investigation. The attention brought to Chris's case helped raise awareness about the need for more thorough investigations of such disappearances and deaths. Chris's family has continued advocating for justice in his case and for other families who have lost loved ones under similar circumstances. They have worked with other families to push for better investigative practices and to keep public attention focused on these unsolved cases. Today, more than 2 decades after Chris Jenkins disappeared on that Halloween night in Minneapolis, his case remains one of the most compelling examples of mysterious deaths that have plagued young men across the American Midwest. Whether Chris was the victim of a serial killer, random violence, or some other unknown circumstance, his death represents a tragic loss of potential and a reminder of dangers that can lurk in familiar environments. If you found this mysterious disappearance as compelling and haunting as we did, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on. We explore the most intriguing missing person cases and unexplained disappearances from around the world, bringing you stories that challenge our understanding of crime, investigation, and the mysteries that surround us. Your support helps us continue investigating these incredible cases. Until next time, remember that some disappearances reveal patterns that may be more sinister than they first appear. And the truth about what happened to young men like Chris Jenkins may be darker and more organized than anyone wants to believe.